The newspaper is dying. That sentence has been written in one form or another for over 20 years. Print circulation keeps falling, newsrooms keep shrinking, and every year another headline asks whether journalism itself can survive the age of AI. But that question misses something far more interesting hiding underneath it. AI isn't just a threat to how media reports the news. It might be the very thing that gives local media a genuinely new reason to exist. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, hit subscribe. Now we've got more of these coming. Let's start with the old model, the one that's dying, because it's worth being honest about exactly what it was. A newspaper's job for well over a century was to observe the world and describe it back to its own readers. Cover the story, report the facts, move on to the next one tomorrow. It was a useful role, and for a long time it was enough. But it was also fundamentally a passive one. The newsroom watched the world go by. It very rarely changed it. Now here's the uncomfortable part almost nobody says out loud, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. In town after town, region after region, all over the world, there are genuinely excellent local businesses. Skilled craftspeople, manufacturers with a capability nobody else nearby has quite mastered. Community initiatives doing real measurable good. And the rest of the world simply doesn't know any of it exists. Not because it isn't good enough to matter. Because nobody with the reach, the trust, and the tools to introduce it to global buyers, investors, or partners ever went looking in the first place. That is precisely the gap AI can now close. And it is precisely the gap the traditional newsroom, built for a different century, was never designed to close on its own. So picture for a moment a different kind of local newsroom. One that doesn't only report on its region from the outside, the way it always has, but actively goes out and discovers it from the inside. Using AI to systematically map every notable business, every skilled craftsperson, every underused resource in its own backyard, not waiting patiently for a press release to land in an inbox, but going out and finding what's genuinely worth finding on its own initiative. Call that a grassroots think tank, operating out of the very newsroom that already knows its region better than anyone else on earth. Because here's the thing, journalists already have the two ingredients this actually required. Deep local trust built up over years, and the instinct for what's a real story worth telling versus what's just noise. What AI supplies is the third ingredient they never had at this scale before. The ability to research, structure, and package that local knowledge into something a global audience, investor, or buyer can immediately understand and act on. Let's make this concrete, because it's easy to talk about AI helping newsrooms in the abstract, and much harder to picture what it actually looks like day to day. So let's walk through three very different ways this plays out, one at a time. The first is something every newsroom already does, just done far better. Right now, in almost any local paper, businesses and community members pitch stories to editors constantly. A small manufacturer emails in about a new export contract. A local charity writes in about a project. A craftsperson reaches out because they think their work deserves coverage. And the honest truth is that most of it never gets read properly at all. It's simply buried under the sheer volume that arrives every single week with one overstretched editor trying to make sense of it all. Imagine, for instance, a small family-run coffee roastery on the edge of town. They've spent 3 years perfecting a slow roast process nobody else in the region uses, and they finally write in, hoping someone will notice. In the old model, that email sits in a queue behind 200 others, and more often than not, it never gets opened at all. AI changes that arithmetic completely. It can sift through every single pitch that comes in, not to replace the editor's judgment, but to do the first exhausting pass for them, surfacing the ones with real substance, flagging a genuine local talent or an overlooked resource hiding inside an otherwise ordinary-sounding email. The coffee roastery's pitch doesn't get lost in the pile. It gets seen. And the editor gets to spend their limited time on judgment and storytelling, not on the exhausting job of sorting through everything that lands in the inbox. The second way is even more interesting because it means the newsroom doesn't have to wait for the pictures to arrive at all. With AI, an editor can proactively scan their own locale, mapping out who the real players actually are, what initiatives are already quietly underway, and what a business or organization nearby is genuinely doing that matters. This includes the kind of work that never makes it into a press release at all. A local recycling startup turning old solar panels into usable materials again, say, or a small logistics firm quietly cutting emissions across its whole regional supply chain. Doing real work to help humanity and the planet without ever thinking to tell anyone about it. AI-aided outreach then lets the newsroom reach directly into that ecosystem, finding the founders, the players, the people with a genuine and considered point of view, rather than sitting back and waiting for them to come forward on their own. And then there's a third channel, and it's worth naming specifically because it's the one part of this that stays distinctly, deliberately human. AI simply accelerates it. It never replaces it. Checking in directly with community leaders, the people who already have their finger on the true pulse of a locale, who know which family business is quietly thriving and which community project is genuinely making a difference, remains one of the fastest, most reliable ways to understand what's actually happening on the ground. Picture an editor sitting down with the head of a local artisans cooperative, a weaving collective perhaps, that's been operating for 2 generations but has never once sold beyond its own province. AI can help that editor prepare properly for the conversation, research the cooperative's real history beforehand, and follow up systematically afterwards, so nothing falls through the cracks. But the conversation itself, the relationship, the trust, it stays exactly where it has always belonged. With a real person, the community already trusts sitting across the table from another real person. Now put all 3 of those together, sieving the pictures that arrive, proactively scanning and reaching into the ecosystem, and staying close to community leaders on the ground, and look at what actually emerges. Not 3 separate initiatives, one genuine matching engine, surfacing real talent that would otherwise stay invisible. Uncovering resources nobody had ever properly catalogued. Identifying assets a region has always quietly possessed, but never quite realized were valuable to the rest of the world. That precisely is the work capable of sparking a fresh line of thought locally, and that precisely is the work that spurs a region's economy toward going properly global. This is where it gets genuinely powerful, because the story doesn't end at discovery. AI can take that coffee roastery story or that weaving cooperative's history, translate it, structure it, and match it against real global demand and capital in a way that used to take a whole team of analysts several weeks to do properly. What used to require a foreign correspondent, a professional translator, and months of patient relationship building can now happen inside a single newsroom, in a fraction of the time, at a fraction of the cost. And notice what happens to the direction of the story itself. Instead of media simply documenting the local economy from a comfortable distance, the way it always has, it becomes an active participant in growing it, surfacing overlooked local talent, resources, and opportunity, then presenting it outward to the rest of the world with real conviction. Think about what that actually means for a regional paper brave enough to adopt this. It's no longer only competing for local readers, shrinking attention, fighting for the same eyeballs as every other outlet. It becomes the trusted local gateway that global buyers, investors, and partners check first. Because it's the one source that has already done the hard work of finding, vetting, and presenting what's genuinely worth their attention in that region. That is a business model built for the AI era, not one still quietly hoping to survive it. There's a second, quieter shift worth naming here too, and it's just as important as the first. For decades, the flow of global attention has run in one direction only, from the center outward. Global media decides what counts as newsworthy, and the regions simply wait patiently to be noted. AI-empowered local newsrooms can flip that direction entirely. The region does the noticing first on its own terms and presents itself to the world exactly as it wants to be seen, not as it's filtered through someone else's lens, hundreds or thousands of miles away. This is not a small pivot. It's the difference between a newsroom that reports on decline, resigned to it, and a newsroom that actively participates in its own region's revival, one grassroots economy at a time, becoming visible to the world that never knew to look for it. So here's what we'd put to any local publisher, editor, or media owner watching this right now. The tools to build exactly this already exist today, not in some distant future today. The question was never really whether AI is coming for the newsroom. The real question is whether your newsroom becomes the one that goes out and finds the world's next great local opportunity first, or waits quietly and simply reports on it after someone else already has. If you found this useful, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below with your view. I read everyone. I'm Raymond. Till the next video, bye for now.